How's it going, everybody? My name is Unpause, aka Ben, aka Pug, aka whatever you want. Today, this is the first video of the albums of the decade discussion, as you can see by the picture up here on my nice little B-Tech overlay. We are doing Taboo today, so I'm going to be discussing lots of different popular albums of the decade, and then at the end of the video I'll sort of say whether it would get a spot on my top. We'll go the top 15, I think, is what I'll aim for. Only going to do one album per artist, so it's not just filled with like 5 albums from Kanye West or Kendrick Lamar or whoever would get the most. But it sort of stops it being a biased list and it's a bit more representative if I have different albums. So one album per artist. So the album I review, whether it gets a spot on the list or not, it is my favourite album from that artist from the decade. So this is my favourite Denzel Curry album from this decade. And yeah, today I'm going to be discussing that a little bit and then saying whether it would get a spot on my top 15 albums list. So I'm just going to pull up the track list just so I can sort of make sure that I'm remembering all the songs correctly. And then we'll go straight into it. So Taboo came out, 2018, sort of middle of the year, and it was very popular because I think the way it was released was quite popular, sort of released in 3 different segments with the light side, the grey side, and then the dark side, with the songs kind of fitting a theme of getting sort of darker in subject matter and like the overall tone of the song. And it was quite a popular way that it was released, and it was quite unique. But it came across quite well. It made it sort of unique. It gave it a different element that a lot of albums didn't have. But it doesn't make it hold up any better for me. It just kind of still makes it... It's the same for replayability. And that's kind of what matters more for an album of the decade. Obviously, songs or albums that have released last year or this year haven't had to like stand the test of time as much as an album that came out in 2010. So I will kind of factor that in a little bit and sort of give... If an album came out ages ago and I still love it, obviously it's going to get more sort of like bonus points because it's impressive to stay relevant at that point. There's how many songs? I don't have the math skills for this. 13 songs on the album, and I would say all of them are at least solid. So the way I sort of rate things, if I would give it less than a 5 out of 10, it's bad. More than a 5 out of 10 is good. If it's a 5 out of 10, it's just average. I don't dislike it, I don't like it. And I don't think there are any songs on Taboo that I dislike, which is always a good step. There's no songs that I would skip all the time, that I hate listening to them. There are some songs that I don't enjoy as much, in the form of Cash Maniac. Mad I Got It isn't amazing, Switch It Up isn't amazing, and Blackest Balloon isn't something to write home about to me. They're all good to listen to, but they don't really provide anything unique. They don't provide a style that I love. The verses are good, but nothing that stands out, and the beats aren't anything that stands out. And on an album that has such incredible lyricism and subject matter, the ones that don't kind of then suffer from it because you're comparing them to songs of the same caliber, and then when it doesn't have as good lyricism, it's not as good. The intro song Taboo was very strong for me. It set it up nicely, discussing the taboo topics that it did, and the beat was alright, the verses were alright. They weren't amazing, but it was kind of a good storytelling song that set up the album nicely. Which then leads into Black Balloons, which was one of my favourite songs of the year and holds up to me as it's almost like poppy and fun to listen to, which isn't overly common for Denzel Curry songs, but it was a nice change. It was very fun to listen to, and that's kind of a reason I still enjoy listening to it. It's not boring for a second. It's not as hard as some of the other songs on this album or his songs in general, but it was fun to listen to. Sumo I liked as well. I thought that was a very heavy, sort of hard-hitting song, similar to Super Saiyan Superman, Perks, and Vengeance. They were all like angrier songs, which is sort of what I think Denzel Curry does best. And they all sort of had an element of uniqueness to them. The middle portion was a little bit weaker. Again, Super Saiyan Superman, Switch It Up, and Mad I Got It were all good, but I don't think any of them sort of constituted being great. And that's where this album kind of falls off a little bit for me, because I think, especially to be discussed as an album of the year, an album of the decade especially, the songs have to consistency is key, to put it sort of like summarised. You can't have 10 out of 10s for 4 songs and then 6 out of 10s for another 4 songs, because it's hard to stay immersed in an album if you find yourself getting bored for 3 songs in a row, or even every other song you're finding it a bit dull. So it suffers because it's not as consistent. I didn't find every song something that I loved, and a lot of the songs on here that were weaker in terms of how they sounded, like Taboo, it had good lyricism. You could still pay attention to it, and that sort of brought you into the album more, even if it was not as interesting to listen to. The lyrics were, and you could pay attention to them and then still stay in the immersion of the album and still be listening sort of intently. And the 3 songs on the light side, the grey side, I didn't like as much. But then it does pick up again with Sirens and Clout Cobain, which for me were 2 of the best songs on the album, and again 2 of the best songs of the year. Specifically Sirens, I thought that song was incredible. The lyricism was brilliant. It's a brilliant song with brilliant subject matter, and it just it was very sort of heavy to listen to, but the beat was quite sort of positive. The chorus was very upbeat, but the lyrics were all very heavy, and it was a nice contrast to listen to, something that kind of sounded so happy and positive whilst being very dark in subject matter. And it was just a very impactful song for me. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was one of the more mature songs on the album and in Denzel's discography, and it was just, yeah, incredible. I didn't have any issues with that song, and Clout Cobain as well was brilliant. It was a very good sort of social commentary about how sort of people think, I suppose. It's again not one that's held up as well for me, Clout Cobain. I liked it, but I thought it was a little bit overhyped, and whilst it was very good and had a strong message, it wasn't as enjoyable to listen to. On the darker side, I wasn't as big a fan as well. I thought the Blackest Balloon Perks and Black Metal Terrorists were good, and they sort of showcased Denzel's rapping abilities. But were they anything to write home about? I don't think so. I think they were all very heavy songs, which I'm a fan of, but I think they didn't really offer anything that stood out. I don't think any of the songs stood out from each other. I don't think any of them were unique enough to sort of constitute being like something that you would think about and think, wow, I really like this song, I want to go back and listen to it. But again, that may just be me. Vengeance, however, I loved. I thought the 2 features were amazing. JPEG Mafia and Zilla Kami both had brilliant verses, and Denzel himself had a brilliant verse. And this was probably my favourite song on the album, and my favourite song to this day from the album that I still listen to the most. It was just very angry, brilliant beat. I've said brilliant so many times this video, but the album was pretty good. The style of Vengeance was similar to his old style, but it sort of showed an evolution of his musical ability and how his style has changed from the old days of, I can't remember the album name. God, what was it? Of 32 Zell. I couldn't remember the name for it for some reason, but 32 Zell. It showed sort of an evolution of his ability from then, and just how sort of different his style has become. It sort of wore its influences on its sleeve, sort of taking influence from people like JPEG Mafia, people like Death Grips will get brought into it, sort of the more experimental styles, but it paid off very well for me. It didn't feel like it was too experimental to the point where it hadn't been executed well. It felt like the execution was good. It felt like the idea was good. The lyricism was aggressive, which fit the theme perfectly. And overall, it just worked nicely. As an album overall, I don't think it holds up as well as some of the other albums from that year and from the decade. But it's certainly still a strong album. I think it's his strongest album. It's better than Zoo, better than 32 Zell. It's more mature, and the songs all seem to fit the theme of the album. I think there were a few songs you could take off. Like I said, Cash Maniac didn't fit as much, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. That was kind of example of me to me of like experimentational music that didn't quite work, but you can't have experimental music that works all the time. I think overall the album was solid, and it does mainly show sort of how much potential Denzel Curry has. But for me, it could have been better, and it won't be one of my albums of the decade. I think at the time I gave it an 8 out of 10, but I'm not sure what that would be today. But it certainly wouldn't make my albums of the decade, just because I think it's not quite consistent enough to be something that I find myself going back to, something that I find myself listening to as a whole album. I'll listen to a select few songs of it, maybe Sirens, Black Balloons, occasionally Sumo, occasionally Cloud Cobain, and Vengeance quite frequently. But the rest of the songs were nothing special. They were all good, but nothing that overly interested me and I thought was amazing. So yeah, for this album, will not make my top 15 albums of the decade, but a very solid album nonetheless. I haven't quite decided what the next album I'll discuss will be, but it should probably be uploaded within a few days of this video. And yeah, that's sort of my thoughts for Taboo. Let me know what you thought of this album and how you think it holds up today, how it's changed in your eyes, and what you think it compares to in terms of a quality level. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next stream.